Okay, we're live. Welcome to episode 14 of the Tom and John Show. We are fortunate to have the superintendent at Hazeltine National, Chris Tritabaugh, and a social media junkie that I think, Chris, that's how we've met. Tom is struggling with a computer issue, but I think that he's going to join us in a few minutes. He's kind of in here live, but he'll be joining us soon. I'll introduce myself. I'm John Kaminsky. I'm an associate professor at Penn State University and run the 2-year turf program. And Tom and I started these kind of, I don't know, they're not really talk shows, whatever they are, these kind of hangouts last year just to kind of share information and get some people to talk. And that's what we have here today. We have Chris Tritabaugh joining us. Chris, I'm going to give a brief bio before I let you go, and then maybe you can expand on it a little because I'm sure I won't do it justice. But so Chris is a native of Minnesota, grew up in Albany, Minnesota, which I didn't even ask you where that was. Is that just outside of Minneapolis?
It's about 90 miles from here, from Minneapolis, so it's not very far.
Okay, so I know you got your start. Yeah, so it's not far. I don't know. What Minnesota, everything's cold and far from everything, I guess. But I don't know. I've been there a couple of times. I went to.
If you go east to west, things are generally pretty close. If you go north to south, you can get some distance. So.
Yeah. So Albany, Minnesota, and you worked at Town and Country Club prior to going to school with Bill Larson, and then you went to the University of Minnesota. Intern at Town and Country Club, and then ultimately made your way back working there before you got your first superintendent's position at Northland Country Club in Duluth, Minnesota in 2007. And I think that's when we met, and that's probably around 2008-9 when Twitter started becoming popular. And that's kind of how we met. And then since then you spent 6 years there, and now you're in your third year at Hazeltine National, which we'll touch on. Obviously you're hosting the Ryder Cup next year, so that's a big deal, especially because the U.S. team can't get their act together and win. So hopefully you'll trick up the course somehow to make them have an advantage. So I gave you a brief bio, but why don't you kind of give me a little bit of an overview of kind of how your path started and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, so probably like a lot of people in this business, I started working at the golf course at home in my hometown, and just because it was something fun and something that held some interest for me. And the more I worked there, the more I thought it was something that I might want to do in time, as a career. And the funny thing is you say that, lots of people say that, but I don't know if they really know what they're getting into when they decide that that's what they want to do. So I went down, my original intent was to go to school for landscape architecture, become a golf course architect, or somehow get involved in that. And then I realized a couple things. I realized I couldn't draw, and I had no concept of being, I had this architecture. It was in the architecture lineage, and it was a sort of a spatial class, field of space kind of thing. And the teacher kept talking about, well, just go sit in the space and feel the space and draw this space. And I had no concept of that. I thought, if I'm going to do this for 4 years and then have to get a master's in this, I don't know. I had too much to figure out. So I switched over to turf, and that's kind of where I ended up now. So it's I always tell people, students and such that I have, interns and people I meet, that my one regret is that I never left Minnesota for a job, an internship or something of that nature. But now it's all worked out pretty well. But I still look at that and go, I'm really proud of that fact that I've only worked here and I went to school here. But I still sometimes wish I would have just experienced something different, West Coast, East Coast, or something of that nature. So I still tell people that's my biggest regret, that I didn't go that route at some point in my career. But it's all worked out okay.
Yeah, I think, David, I deal with the students all the time in the internships, and some of them want to go away and some of them don't. And it's a tough thing because you want to kind of encourage them to get out of their comfort zone, but also some of them are smart and say, I want to end up in this area, but I want to establish roots and a career presence in that area. So I would say for you, it's worked out pretty well.
Well, I think that helped me because all along I knew the people in the industry, and as I got further along, I got to know people, not just in the turf side of the business, but in maybe the golf side of the business. People from the Minnesota Golf Association, people of that nature. And I think in the end, when you wrap it all together, and why did Hazeltine pick me? I think all of that had something to do with it. So the people sort of say things happen for a reason, and you know, you get where you get because of things that have gone on in your life and your career, and you know, I think that was the case for me. So.
Yeah, so I'll start with, I know we want to get to a few topics, and one of them being social media. Maybe we'll start there because that's how we met. And I don't know exactly how we met on social media, but I'm sure we were tweeting each other somewhere along the lines. And I started teaching class about blogs and having my students early on when I was here build blogs. And I know that you were very big into it. And so walk us through that a little bit in terms of, you know, how you got introduced to social media and how you've used that in work.
Well, I started with it. My sister, it's something she does. I mean, that's sort of her career. She works for a PR web design firm that also does social media, community management, that sort of thing. And so that's what she does. And she started talking to me about that time frame you were mentioning, like 2008, 2009, saying, this is something you should really do. I think your membership would like it. I think it would be a good, you know, sort of brand, you know, branding thing for you. So Twitter and the blog and lots of other social media stuff that I did pretty intently when I was at Northland. And I think, as I mentioned before, with you know how things worked out and being able to go from Northland to Hazeltine, I think that was a part of it too. It wasn't the one and only thing. It wasn't the thing that made the difference maybe, but it was a part of the membership here, sort of recognizing what I was doing, what I was capable of, and how I looked at things. You know, so it was sort of a working resume, if you will.
Do the two clubs look at social media differently? Do they did Northland, or either way, is one like it more than the other, or do they change how you you know, have you based on data?
How are you?
I'm going to eject your other one out and then talk
Eject.
I think you know that's a very interesting question. I think Northland, when I was there, I started doing this with they wanted more communication. You know, that was a big part of my getting hired there. We want somebody who's going to communicate with the membership, who's going to do that on a regular basis, and that happened. They didn't necessarily ask for the social media, the blogging, but of course that was something that sort of developed in that time frame. You know, that 2005 to 2010 sort of time frame during the time that I was there. I think there was some, you know, I think there was some maybe negative viewpoint on my doing that. You know, is this time well spent at Northland?
Oh, at Northland, okay.
Yep. However, when I got here, you know, again, communication was a big thing. We want somebody who's going to really give us a lot of communication, and I would say that the response to my use of social media and blogging has been really positive here. In fact, people would maybe ask for more than what I do, if anything. But I've also really changed the way that I used it at Northland and the way that I use it here at Hazeltine. And I think making that transition gave me an opportunity to sort of just, you know, take a look at it and say, I'm going to do this different.
Yeah. Well, how are you doing that differently then?
You know, the biggest thing is at Northland I wrote a lot on the blog about philosophy. This is why we do it. You know, this is why I think it's the right thing to do. You know, this is the reason why we allow the turf to get brown, or this is the reason why you see this. I haven't done too much of that here. Here it's more sort of informing only of what we're doing and why we're doing it, not so much philosophical stuff. But I think that's also a maturation of my own development of my philosophy. At the beginning, I felt the need to sort of think through it, and writing like that in that media was a way to facilitate that sort of maturation of my own philosophy. Now I feel like I've got it, and the changes and the thinking in continuing to develop a philosophy and to make tweaks isn't as big, and it doesn't require sort of that thought process from myself. So I don't feel like I need that outlet anymore necessarily.
Well, that's actually a good transition into the next kind of topic. When we first met back in probably 2009 or something, we were really pushing things at Northland to favor bentgrass growth and the idea of low nitrogen, high iron, and some of these unusual practices that we've now been working on research on for 6.5 years because of 6 years anyway because of that. Can you talk about a little bit of the stuff that you did there, and maybe this feeds into the idea that you have to like sell the philosophy, and this is why things maybe don't look so good because the end result is something that you want. But can you tell me what you were doing there? Like, what was the idea and the goal behind that agronomic plan?
Well, so I had a couple friends during that time that I was at Northland that were contracting and working with Greenway Golf, and so I think probably not everybody is aware of that or what what that was about. But the gist of it was trim it, a lot of ferrous sulfate, really low nitrogen. Basically creating an acid type environment, an environment that in multiple ways was poor for POA annua proliferation and infiltration. Really harsh, I think, developed in an arid climate. What I found, and I think what the people who contracted with them found, was in my own dabbling, is that you get into humidity, which we have here in the Midwest, and there was some need for throttling on some of that sort of stuff. So I did a lot. I look back on it now, I got to think about some of the stuff I did and some of the rates I sprayed of things, and I just can't even believe, I can't understand what the hell I was thinking, just shooting myself in the foot. But ultimately, what happened was I really learned the limits of, what's a rate of ferrous sulfate that's going to make turf look really good in the middle of the summer, and what's a rate that's going to just the hell out of it.
Is a pound's too much, maybe?
What's that?
A pound of ferrous sulfate's too much?
A pound per 1,000 might be a little bit too much. Yes, I can say that I have hands-on experience with a pound per 1,000, but
yeah, I'm going to show some pictures of our plots. Actually, I'll share it now because I want to. Let me see if I can find it. Screen 2. Does it work? So can you see that picture there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I tweeted this out the other day when I was in Canada giving course walks, and I was talking about the research we've been doing, which really, was spearheaded by some of the stuff that you guys were doing and other people were doing. And it looks like these plots look like crap because this is in like March and the bentgrass hasn't really woken up, but it was a good time to take a picture because you can see the amount of POA. And so I don't even know what this treatment is, but I know that it's probably primo high, 3 pounds of nitrogen per year, and maybe iron and maybe not. But I have that plot, and the one right below it, right below it is this one, and you can see the plot up here in the top part of that. You can see the POA from the other plot, and this one's fairly clean of the POA annua. So we've been doing quite a bit, and when I started that work, I was like, yeah, this thing is going to be a total joke. It's not going to work, and we've obviously had some huge variation in terms of our POA populations based on some of this work, but I think that when you're a real-world environment with traffic and play and all those things, you have to kind of be a little bit more careful about it. So you were pushing there, and I remember seeing videos of you saying like, look, this is, it's I think it was you that there was like dead turf or like a weakened area in the front, and you were like, look, this is why the bad grass is going out and the bent grass is coming in. So I know you were doing a lot of selling to the membership.
Yep.
So how have you fine-tuned that or adjusted that? You said you've learned a lot, and now you're at Hazeltine. How's that changed?
Well, I think knowing the time of the year when you can push like that, and knowing, what I've really learned is sort of cycling of, I don't know if cycling is the right word, but just timing of nitrogen nutrition, changing the timing. That's kind of my biggest weapon, I would say. And then the PGRs and how I use those and the timing of that. I've used a little bit of velocity on fairways. The ferrous sulfate is, it's a pretty great tool, but I wouldn't call it there was a time where I felt like that was like the crux of the whole program, but I don't necessarily think that's the case anymore, and I don't use it in that manner. I've just gotten a lot more gentle with what I've done, and I think that comes from I think getting older, getting smarter, and experiencing negative results. Really, I mean, that's what I got the opportunity to do up there. was to really push things to the limit, beyond the limit in a lot of cases, and then be able to go, okay, well, that's too much. Maybe this isn't enough, but where's the middle ground? And because of that, I feel like now we've really hit a good middle ground on managing and promoting bentgrass, and doing so in a fairly, I think, a really efficient and economical manner.
Yeah, Tom, that's a good question for you, actually. You did a lot of work on turf physiology and obviously weed management in POA. What are your thoughts? Your general overall thoughts in terms of managing, for bentgrass as opposed to, and trying to keep the POA out, knowing it's a futile effort, but you can fight it for a long time.
Well, it's a futile effort, and geography plays a huge role. There's just places where you're kind of chasing your tail. Anytime you think you got a tactic that's going to work, turns around and bites you, and the next year it doesn't. But, speaking of geographic locations in POA, they drive, in the warm season regions of the country, the pH down quite low. And POA doesn't like that very much. You get under 5.5, POA it will struggle, and bentgrass doesn't mind that all so much. And the same is true if you couple trimmett or even cutlass with what it does differentially in growth suppression to those two species, and overlay the pH effects. It makes clear sense to me that you can create a condition that is favorable to bent for sure. Now, how that translates in terms of where you are exactly, and Duluth is a little bit dislocated from Minneapolis, but not that much. So I think there's some things that will translate and some things that won't, and it goes to what was said earlier on about timing. And when you're even 150 or 200 miles in latitude north to south, that can be huge. When I was growing up and taking care of turf in northern Iowa, Route 20 cuts across the middle of Iowa, and it's only about 100 miles or so south of Charles City, Iowa, where I grew up. And in the wintertime, they'd get rain, and we'd get freezing rain and snow. POA bent responses were drastically different in 150 miles.
So what you're saying is that Chris should pray for some winter kill during the winter months to take the little POA that he's got on his greens out.
Well, yeah, it would look like whatever you got going on is spot on in terms of management. But when you think you have it spot on, Mother Nature says, well, let's try it this way once, and then you go down the tubes.
Yeah. So go.
Sorry, John.
I was going to say, were you going to say something? I didn't know if you were about to say something.
Well, I think that's it. I mean, Tom makes a great point in that, there's no bones about the fact that in Minnesota we have a huge advantage in that during the winter, we don't have any play. We're closed. We're frozen. Sometimes we have snow. Last couple of years haven't been too tough on POA, but then throw in a year, it seems like about every third or so is pretty hard on it. So you go without covers. You don't cover tees. We don't cover any fairway areas, and we haven't been covering greens the last couple of years. And you can take some of that population out. Not all of it, probably, but a good portion of it.
But you don't cover anything because you're bentgrass. What do you do for snow mold control?
I'm going to let my phone quit ringing here. You guys.
That's all right. I thought it was mine, actually. I looked over and I was like, nope, I don't see mine ringing.
Okay, it's done. Snow mold control, we've used the Bear products the last couple of years. Actually, I've used it I've used it the last couple of years here at Northland, but I had used it 3 or 4 years before, or here at Hazeltine. I used it 3 or 4 years at Northland before that. Worked really well for us. Haven't had any problems with it, any breakthrough. I like the stress guard coming out of winter. I think we get a more efficient green up, a quicker green up in the spring from it. So it's been a good program for us.
If you don't treat, do you just have do you treat your roughs?
I do not treat any rough, and you can get some stark contrast between the treated areas and the rough. Oh yeah, the triangles. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think the last topic we can touch on in the next 10 minutes or so, you said in our kind of pre-discussion that there hasn't been, it would be a boring topic, but I want to hear about it anyway.
Yeah.
You've treated, and I don't know all the changes that you've made since you've gotten there, maybe not much, but what have you done since you've been there that you would consider not just a general maintenance, and then what of that has been leading into the Ryder Cup preparation?
I think the biggest thing we did that wouldn't be general maintenance is we did a billy bunker liner system in all of our bunkers last fall. We had, and for many years, Hazeltine's had the issue. Robert Trent Jones bunkers redone by Reese, big flashed faces. Super prone to washouts. So washouts for many years, of course, which then silts up the sand and plugs the drainage, not necessarily the tile underneath, but the water just can't get through the sand. So lots of water sitting in them. I mean, we would get a half an inch of rain over the course of an hour, maybe less than an hour, and they were just pretty much destroyed. We dealt with that for 2 years while I was here, of course, many years before that, but the thought was when they redid the greens and the fairways was that the bunkers we could sort of make them work until after the Ryder Cup and then come in and fix them. But we saw that in 2 years it just wasn't gonna be the case, and we were having a good solid inch of rain or more than that was creating probably 2 to 3 days of work for us to get them back into shape, and then the shape was just reasonable. So we went ahead. We had a couple test bunkers, one of which was Billy Bunker. We really liked it. Did a phenomenal job. 5 inches in 8 hours was the biggest test we had for it. It was, like 2 guys with a shovel. It took 5 minutes to fix the bunker. So we put them all in. We did all of them, all 108 last fall. New sand. New drainage in the sense that all new piping and a few additional fingers and such, and it's been as advertised. It's been a revelation for us. We have not pumped a bunker. We have the biggest washout we had was from 2 inches in an hour, and it was washouts, maybe 5 square feet total. In a bunker at the most. We'd sent 2 guys out with flat shovels, and they fixed everything in an hour. So we've gone from just a nightmare to not worrying about rain at all in the bunker since. So that was the biggest, I would say, non-turf maintenance project that we've had in preparation for the Ryder Cup.
So that's got to be pretty good. I keep seeing all these events and championships, and I was over at the Open before all the rains came in, and I watched it on TV. And just thought to myself, if you don't have a good, drainage, or maybe your bunker systems aren't good, that could be a total devastating blow in the middle of an event if you get it. So now you're in pretty good shape. They hold up well.
They do. The bunkers hold up really well, and the club has spent a lot of money on drainage over the years, going back to, before the '91 Open. And for the 02 PGA, 09 PGA, they've really improved the drainage here a lot, such that we can get an inch of rain in an hour, something of that nature, and the place will drain down pretty quick. If we just leave it on its own, it'll go well. If we get a bunch of people out with squeegees pushing water towards drains, it'll be even quicker. So we're really good in that sense.
I don't know much about Hazeltine. Are the greens there set up to, they undulated greens where you don't have to have a 13 on the stimp meter, or is the plan to be super fast? Or
I don't think super fast. I think it's probably what you'd expect from a PGA championship, 12 to 13 range. They're not super undulating. They're sort of subtle. There are some undulations, but you could have them 13 here, and they would do really well. You're not losing too much for cupping locations from that standpoint.
Did you go to the past Ryder Cups? You weren't at Hazeltine at the time, I guess, but did you go to the Ryder Cup at Medina?
No, I didn't go to Medina. I wasn't yet here and hadn't started the process yet, so I didn't go to Medina. I also did not go to Scotland for the Ryder Cup, although we were over there for Bigga, for the biggest show last winter, and we did go up to St. Andrews and we spent a day at Glen Eagles, which was really probably almost more valuable. I got to spend time with Steve Chappell. We spent the whole day with him. He took us around, and we really just chatted. It was great to get his feedback after the event, to look at, ask him, what would you have done different? What did you like? What did you feel like you really missed on? That kind of stuff. And we've maintained a good relationship, so that's been fun. Curtis, I know Curtis a little bit at Medina. I had dinner with Curtis and Tom down in Orlando a couple winters ago, the GIS, and have maintained good communication with him and such. So it's great. Anytime, it's kind of like building a house. The last person, the last person who builds their house is hopefully going to have the best house because they get all the advice of everybody else. So hopefully we can do the same.
Yeah, well, it's nice that you also don't have to do a ton in terms of construction and stuff. You have relatively new greens with pretty much bent grass on them and new bunkers. And so, how many volunteers do you have? How many people are already coming out of the woodwork?
Yeah, we're gonna do that in December. We're gonna do our volunteer applications. But the requests are coming thick and fast. Probably 4 to 5 a week right now. Whether it be through Twitter, whether it be an email, a phone call, there's a lot of them. So I don't know how many we're going to have just yet. It will be somewhere probably 100, 125, somewhere in that range or so. There's a lot of interest. There's no doubt about that.
Well, that's the world stage.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing too, because you obviously have people from all over the world wanting to come volunteer, but a lot of people in the States as well. What do you anticipate doing in terms of, like, Curtis went crazy and had that noise. Curtis had.
Oh, sorry. I think I was exhaling. My fault.
Yeah, that's what it was. It sounded like someone ruffling papers. He had a lot of sponsors that helped cover a lot of the costs and the lunches and all that. Is that something that you're going to have to deal with as the superintendent? I don't know exactly how it works. I guess it's up to you to kind of pull that together.
Yeah, that's a sort of a club responsibility. The PGA doesn't handle any of that, so we pull that together ourselves. And I've got somebody that's gonna, from an event planning standpoint, that's gonna help us with that. And it's a little daunting right now. I kind of told myself, all right, I'm not going to do any of that until probably September 1 is when I'll start to think about some of that. So, yeah, I like Curtis's plan, the way he worked with the sponsors, the way he got them to get involved, and from my standpoint, we talked earlier about how my career has been here in Minnesota, and this is where I grew up. So I want the Minnesota superintendents to really feel like this is their event and that it's something that they got to experience and were a part of, and that they can step away from it and say, hey, that wasn't just Hazeltine's deal, but that was our deal, and we got to really be a big part of that. So that's something I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, I think it's great actually when you are able to do that. It amazes me, and I try and tell the students and everybody that I talk to the same thing. I say, being a superintendent is, and Tom, everybody has said this, it's a very small percentage of what you do is agronomy once you make it to the level, Chris, that you're at. And then you start talking about like event planners and people pulling together, all of this type of stuff. It's a totally different beast. I was at RTJ a few weeks ago visiting interns, and Scott Furlong was showing me his list of volunteers and the days they're going to be there, and you have to be ultra organized to be able to pull all that together.
Well, when you've got 100-some people there, you know, three-quarters of which, two-thirds to three-quarters of which are from not from your property, so they don't know the property, they don't know your sort of philosophy and the way that you do things. I mean, you've got the potential, if it's not organized, to just have chaos. You know, I mean, and that's not. I mean, we've all been to those events. You guys have been to many of them, probably many more than I have. And you go there and you've got all these people, and it's just like, holy smokes, if this isn't detailed out to almost a minute, this could go very badly. So but I think, you know, again, that's where you look at people who have gone before you, people who have done events like this in the past, and you get as much advice from them. I was at Valhalla last year for the PGA. I'm going to go. My assistant and I are going to Whistling Straits for the PGA for a couple of days this year. My assistant worked at the Farmers Open in Torrey Pines this winter. So, you know, we're just trying to get what we can for experience. I've got a staff here, full-time staff, and some seasonal staff too, who have all been here for 02 PGA, 09 PGA. So there's a lot of experience just on the staff and you know, in regard to, you know, what to expect. And I think that will really help keep me from getting caught you know, sort of off guard or unaware of things. I'm sure stuff like that will happen, but I feel pretty comfortable with the guys in place and the knowledge that they have. So.
Awesome. Well, I think we're at about 30 minutes, and I don't want to take up too much more of everybody's time, but I figure what I would do is give Chris, give you the last word on your end in terms of you know, anything that you want to share. You know, a quick tip of what to do and what not to do with the iron program, or what to do and not to do when you're requesting to volunteer at the Ryder Cup in 2000.
Yeah, right. Well, I think, you know, from a volunteer standpoint, people have reached out to me through email or a phone call. Email is the best way because it's easiest for me to keep that. A phone call is difficult because it's hard to keep a voicemail. Email gives me something in writing that I can keep information, and I can save that and put it away and reach out to them at the time that our applications are going to go out. You know, in regard to the bent program, the iron, and I think the biggest thing I learned is just, and I think both of you would say this. I mean, Tom, I'm sure you would agree with all your experience over the years. Don't create a self-inflicted wound. And I think I did a lot of that early on, as I did some things where I just look back and like, God, why the hell did I do that? Well, you know, I only caused myself problems. And so I've really gotten away from that, and really just, you know, always trying to not, you know, don't hurt yourself. Don't hurt the course on your own. You know, if the weather's going to do it, that's one thing. You're always having to deal with that. But don't do anything yourself that's going to cause you a big issue. And don't be afraid to be curious about whatever program it is you're using. You know, I've always felt like I've never wanted to close the book on anything and say that, well, that's not for us, or that's not a part of, or doesn't have a place in what we're doing. You know, I just kind of keep it in the back of my mind, and you know, maybe give it a go at some point and see if it can help you. So, you know, curiosity is a really powerful thing, and it can really help you sort of find a good way to, you know, to maybe improve upon what you're doing.
Awesome. Tom, you have any advice for Chris? I know you work closely with Curtis at the Ryder Cup, and you continue to. Any advice from that standpoint?
Well, I think the best advice is to continue the philosophy that is already in place. Don't force things. Don't tend to overthink, because that's very seductive. If you've got an issue, then you think, well, maybe I should try this, try that, and then, as you said earlier on, shoot your foot off. And the better that you can manage your emotion as it relates to what to do, the better off you are. You've got to kind of just step back and recognize what's a given and what you can do things about. And they're not necessarily the same.
That's good advice, I think.
That is. That's a great piece of advice, yeah.
Okay, I don't have anything on my end. I just want to, Chris, I'm sure I'll see you at GIS, and you know, wish you the best of luck though on the Ryder Cup in 2016. And and all your volunteers and organization, and hopefully I'll get to get out there for a day or something and kind of take a look around at what's going on. But I've never been out to that area, so I'm sure I'll have students next year because the Ryder Cup is in 2016, clamoring to intern there next year. So maybe maybe you'll have somebody come up that way. But
I quite imagine, yeah.
Yeah, I know them and 50 million other students.
Right.
Different universities. But I want to thank you, though, for coming on and taking the time to speak with us today about it. I think, since meeting you, 6 years ago or so on social media and kind of following your story and your career and your blog and everything, it's been great. So we'll wrap it up with this. I don't know who we have next, Tom, in our chats, but I could go back to I think we actually have Adam Miller coming on next, but not until the end of August because I'm going to South Africa and who knows.
Yeah, 24th he is.
Yeah, so we'll have Adam Miller coming on next. But again, Chris, I want to thank you and wish you all the best of luck. And we'll see everybody next time.
Thanks, Chris.